Hi, I'm Megan Trevina, and today I'm going to be talking about subsistence, teak, and culture. What is traditional ecological knowledge, or teak? This is knowledge that indigenous communities have been developing over long periods of time. It is built from experience with their surrounding areas as well as observation of natural phenomena. It is specific to the environments in which these people live, and it has been passed down through generations. It's been used for hundreds, thousands of years, and it has become very useful to these people. It is crucial to their subsistence practices. It has been used by native peoples for thousands of years. However, as Western influence continues to play a bigger role in Alaska, these traditions are being jeopardized, and survival of the Alaska Native culture is in danger. Aside from wild berries, there is very little edible vegetation that grows naturally in Alaska. Because of that, native Alaskans have had to rely heavily on fishing and hunting for survival. They use traditional ecological knowledge to shape their hunting and gathering practices. Typically, they hunt moose, caribou, marine mammals such as whales and seals. Obviously, these are very large animals, and it's not a simple task. So, over thousands of years and several generations, they've developed techniques and practices to help them be able to successfully hunt these large animals. And they have used their traditional ecological knowledge in order to shape these practices. Indigenous communities have, over time, come up with many resource management practices that build on detailed knowledge of species biology. So these Native Alaskans aren't just using their knowledge to hunt, they're using their knowledge to make sure that they will be able to hunt in the future and to ensure that this food source will be available for future generations. A lot of Westerners feel that teak is not something that should be taken seriously because it's not based on real or serious science. Basically, they mean that because this research isn't done formally, it doesn't take place in a lab, or it's not conducted by actual scientists, that it's not relevant. However, teak does have a basis in science. These native peoples have been studying their environments for centuries. They're the ones that live in it all day, every day. There's no one that knows these areas better than they do. They have also spent generations analyzing weather patterns and habits of these animals that they hunt and share their environments with. There's absolutely no one more qualified to discuss what goes on in these areas. In 1977, the International Whaling Commission imposed a ban on the harvest of bowhead whales, curtailing traditional activities of the Alaskan Inuit. They made this decision based upon bowhead whale population estimates that had been made by Western scientists. These scientists were estimating bowhead whale populations to be between 2,000 and 3,000 whales. However, they were not as well informed about bowhead whale habits and the things that where they can be found, the things that they do, their mating patterns, things like that, as the Inuit people, because they don't have this traditional ecological knowledge. Once they started working with these natives, they were able to readjust their estimates to be between 6,000 to 8,000 whales, which is more than double what they were originally saying, which is huge. This collaboration between the Western scientists and the Inuits is what is called co-management. The goal of co-management is to recognize and use information from both native peoples and state agencies in resource management, typically management of wildlife. So they were able to work together and allow the Inuit people to continue their bowhead whaling practices, which was great for subsistence and their culture. But at the same time, they were able to ensure that the bowhead whales would be able to continue growing and continue to exist. They weren't going to become extinct because of this hunting. Also, collaboration like this legitimizes teak and shows people that it can be very useful. The foods that Alaska Natives traditionally eat are full of all the essential nutrients that a human needs in order to be healthy. Hunting for these animals is also very physically demanding. So when they're hunting, they're getting a really intense workout. So eating these healthy foods and hunting together makes for a very healthy lifestyle. And it's been providing Alaska Natives with this healthy lifestyle for many generations. However, as Western influences are starting to impact these Native peoples, there's definitely a negative impact on their bodies. Programs such as food stamps have been implemented in Alaska by the United States government, and because of this, reliance on subsistence practices has decreased and consumption of store foods has increased. This is for a lot of reasons. Obviously, it's a lot easier to just go down to the store than go out and hunt a caribou. Also, as many Alaskans are engaging in more modern or Western lifestyles, they are needing to make more money, so they don't have as much time to go out and hunt. Also, a lot of the land where they would have hunted and fished previously has been used by Western people to build their homes or to build companies, things like that. So as they're switching to this more dependence on store foods, they're getting less nutrients and they're also having less physical activity. Another important part of these subsistence practices is the fact that they've had a huge impact on these native people's culture. These subsistence practices have been the foundation for their cultural identity as well as their spiritual renewal. These subsistence practices have provided Native Alaskans with an overarching value regarding respect for the land, food, and animals. This respect has allowed them to feel a deeper connection with nature and the environments in which they live. With this gone, that connection to the land is gone. So with less subsistence practices being used, the culture is fading. There's also a loss of community. Many subsistence practices are group activities, such as whaling. Obviously, one person can't just go out and catch a whale and bring it back in. These are huge community things. Often in many villages, when someone brings in a whale, there's a huge celebration and people are joining together. So this creates this sense of community. Without these subsistence practices, that sense of community isn't there anymore. There's also less sharing of food. And the sharing of food has been about more than just survival. This type of distribution and reciprocity, which sustained families, has also shaped their social relationships, and it's helped them to define their social structure. So with less of these subsistence practices going on and less of this food sharing, the Alaska Natives are having to redefine their social structures, which is obviously having an impact on their culture. Typically, it is the younger generations who are moving toward the more Western or modern practices. When these younger Native Alaskans are choosing to rely on store foods instead of subsistence practices, they are leaving behind thousands of years of tradition. In this way, we can see that food choices are symbolic of cultural changes. It's about more than just choosing to go to McDonald's and get a cheeseburger or go get some Hot Pockets instead of going out and hunting or fishing. It's about the fact that their culture is being changed because they're not doing all the same activities they used to do, and they're not using this traditional ecological knowledge which has been built upon for generations. When they choose to shift away from using their traditional ecological knowledge and shift away from their subsistence practices, these Native Alaskans are running the risk of their culture becoming homogenized with that of Westerners, who are the people who are causing all their problems and issues in the first place. So it becomes a pretty complicated situation, and everything gets kind of muddled. A lot of people want to preserve teak, but there's a lot of trouble with that because it's very fragile. And the reason it's so fragile is because it's passed down by word of mouth. It's not typically recorded or written down. So once it stops being used, it's just lost forever. Researchers are making very serious attempts to preserve this teak because they've seen how valuable it can be and they want to be able to use it in the future. It can be difficult to preserve teak, however, because documenting it can be very difficult. This is because of the fact that it's passed down from word of mouth. When this happens, the result can be something similar to the outcome of the game Telephone, where there are a lot of different interpretations of one thing and things can get really confusing. Also, there are language barriers that have to be overcome because most of these researchers who are trying to preserve teak are Westerners and they are not familiar with the languages of these indigenous peoples. So a lot of times they have to rely on interpreters. And then there's also the question of how reliable is that interpreter. Preserving even the essential features of a few such systems may inform us deeply about our common humanity. So beyond resource management, and learning about our environments. Preserving teak can be very helpful in teaching us about humans and what it means to be a human and the things that we all have in common. And that's why it's so important to the study of anthropology.